Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter.
There are three main ways to switch to digital television.
Television was changing rapidly during the mid-2000s. The push to make what was termed as the digital switchover, a move away from the trusty old analogue systems of the past, and onto a more modern digital future, which promised more channels, more options on a more reliable system. Most of the time. Alongside the big push for digital, always came a transition when it came to the quality at which viewers would watch their programmes. And we're not talking about the content of these shows, we're talking about the actual picture quality at which they would be displayed on TV. High definition television was a term that had been in existence since the dawn of the medium. Would you believe that when the BBC started its service in the mid-30s, that was termed as being high definition? Crazy to think about almost 100 years later. So, in the mid-2000s, when the BBC was once again looking to be at the cutting-edge forefront of television, a new service would be launched to showcase the next generation of viewing. This is the story of BBC HD.
Your favourite BBC programmes now in high definition on the BBC HD channel.
2005 was such a great year, man. Revenge of the Sith was storming the cinemas, Doctor Who returned in full force after nearly a decade off air, and when it came to video games, don't even get me started how peak the 6th generation was. Oh, and this little sod was everywhere, including on the ever-increasingly popular mobile phones. On the 8th of November that year, the BBC announced that it would begin trials of high-definition television in 2006. The director of television at the time, Jana Bennett, carefully said, "High definition may take time to grow in Britain, but as with the other technologies we helped to build, the BBC wants to prepare now to be able to deliver the benefits of HD to all its licence payers in the long term." It was perhaps wise to make a statement such as this. After all, when the Beeb first introduced colour television to Brits back in 1967, it would take almost a decade before the number of colour TV sets in homes would outnumber black and white ones. Further down in the same article, it claimed that the BBC had a target to shift all television production to high-definition quality by the year 2010. That gave them just under 5 years to get the ball rolling, a costly upgrade for their production capabilities, one that would only be seen by viewers if they too made the big investment into a high-definition television, and the corresponding equipment.
They use it to produce the game.
The main man on the field today is Peyton Manning.
So why wouldn't you use it to watch the game?
It's Peyton Manning.
Nice Sony. Scoot over a bit, will you?
Nothing compares to a Sony Bravia HD TV, because high definition is in our DNA.
Anybody got any chips?
Aware of the undertaking, the BBC pushed on, and on the 15th of May 2006, the trial of high definition would begin. This initial test was to assess not just the possibility of HD broadcasting, but the practicality of such an undertaking as well. However, many programmes of this era were still made in standard definition, so HD benefits would arguably be limited. The first specially made for HD programme to be shown on the new channel would be Planet Earth, a landmark nature documentary hosted by everyone's favourite David Attenborough. Scheduled to last for a little over a year, right before the trial was set to expire, a public value test was issued out by the BBC Trust to determine whether this new fledgling HD service would be of value to the public. Keep in mind that the BBC gained most of its income from the television licence fee, where Brits would pay an annual sum which would allow them to watch live television legally, and also allow the Beeb to operate its many services and produce its many programmes. A controversial factor, both then and now, if the new HD service was going to be widely accessible, it would have to be deemed a worthwhile offering for the paying public. On the 19th of November, 2007, the results of said test were revealed. The UK's very first free-to-air HD channel was good to go. It was time for the launch of BBC HD.
The BBC has never looked so good. Welcome to BBC HD. Starting now, Thursday night has never tasted so good, with Rick Stein's Mediterranean Escapes.
The 1st of December, 2007, would see the official launch of BBC HD to the public. It was broadcast nationwide and carried by all platform providers as a free-to-air channel. Of course, despite being accessible, viewers would only see the benefits of HD broadcasting if they had the compatible kit. By late 2007, whilst adoption of HD technology was starting to creep up, it was still very much far from being the most popular.
Enjoy expert advice and after-sales service on the latest award-winning Bravia HD-ready LCD TV range. The sale's on at Sony Centres and online at Sony Style.
In terms of a schedule, as per the recommendation, BBC HD would showcase 9 hours of programming every single day, primarily during the prime-time evening hours. In terms of what programmes it would show, it would specifically only broadcast shows that had been made in HD, thus providing a one-stop shop of high-definition content for people to access. These HD-made programmes could come from any of the BBC's 4 main television channels of the time, creating a nice blend of genres across the schedule. Over the remainder of the noughties, this setup would continue to be in place. Although HD adoption was continuing to rise, when it came to viewing figures, this rise wasn't always necessarily reflected. Take Doctor Who, for example, the BBC's leading sci-fi programme, which was enjoying a very successful revival at the time. 2009's episode, Planet of the Dead, was the first to be made specifically in HD, so naturally, when it came to its broadcast, it would be shown on its natural home of BBC One, but also be simulcast on BBC HD. The final figure saw 9.54 million tune into The Doctor's Adventure with Lady Christina on BBC One, consistent with how the show was performing at the time. So, how many tuned into BBC HD? Only around 200,000. Now, granted, at the time, this was the biggest audience that BBC HD had ever managed to pull in, but considering more and more audiences were getting HD TVs, it's not the greatest reflection of enthusiasm for the new technology. I remember watching Planet of the Dead at my uncle's, who had a HD-capable TV, and yet we still watched it on BBC One. Maybe familiarity won out on many viewers? Who knows? BBC HD would trundle along unabated until around 2010. This had been the year the BBC had originally earmarked for all of its content to be made and transmitted in high definition, so it seems appropriate that 2010 would be the year to see a major change to its dedicated HD channel. The 9 hours a day the channel operated on was fast becoming restrictive, given the amount of HD content being churned out on BBC's 1 to 4.
Hello, welcome to The One Show with Alex Jones.
And Jason Manford, and a big welcome to viewers on the brand spanking new BBC One HD channel.
Yes, hello, we're the first show on the show. That was lame effort.
Yeah, it was.
Whilst this made some sense, the original BBC HD channel would see its programme hours extended from 9 to 12 a day, but the content shown would now be from channels outside of BBC One. Another factor that wouldn't help, but was a direct result of BBC One HD's launch, was the demotion of the original BBC HD in the channel guides. On Virgin Media, for example, BBC HD was moved from a quite high placement of 108 all the way down to 187, making it more difficult to find, and yet again diminishing that incentive. But just because the status quo changed, BBC HD wasn't afraid to still experiment and try out new ideas that were becoming noticed in the broadcasting world. One such experiment was implementing the ever-returning fad that cycles around every 30 years or so: 3D. In the early 2010s, 3D was having a resurgence of sorts in the cinema, and sure enough, the television world also sought to capitalise by introducing 3D TVs to the market. Unsurprisingly, these things didn't take off in the big way the companies were hoping for, but during those fruitful years, numerous attempts at introducing 3D programming were attempted. For BBC HD, its first foray would be when it attempted showing both the men and women's Wimbledon finals for 2011. Later that year, the final for Strictly Come Dancing was shown in 3D, for some reason. 2012 would see the Wimbledon finals shown in 3D once more, as well as the opening and closing ceremonies of the London 2012 Olympic Games, which makes a lot more sense than the Strictly final. The men's 100 metre final was also shown in 3D, because, well, why not, I suppose? Other one-off programmes also were shown in 3D via BBC HD. These included Planet Dinosaur, Ultimate Killers, The Last Night of the Proms, although weirdly only the second half got the 3D treatment, and the last offerings for 2012 in 3D would be the children's Mr. Stink, and perhaps the most bizarre of all, the Royal Christmas Message. Why you'd want to specifically watch Queen Elizabeth II's annual monologue in 3 dimensions from the comfort of your own home is far beyond me. In the summer of 2011, rumours began to circulate that the channel would be shut down, as the then current head of HD and 3D at the BBC, Danielle Nagler, resigned. A review that was assessing the BBC outlined that due to a smaller income, due to a licence fee freeze as well as other factors, cost cutting would have to start to occur in full force. Eventually, in the May of 2012, the BBC Trust approved plans that would seal the future and fate of BBC HD. The 25th of March would mark the final broadcast of the original BBC HD. But the story doesn't end there. BBC HD was launched with the aim of carrying viewers into the new realm of high definition, but the corporation's ambitions weren't to just do this at home in the UK, but indeed the world over. A little over a year from its official launch, BBC HD would debut all the way over in Australia, accessible if you had subscription to the Foxtel HD Plus service. Launches in Nordic territories as well as the United States would follow shortly afterwards, and by the early 2010s, even territories in Latin America would be able to receive a localized stream of high-definition programming. As of 2025, pretty much all of these international strands of BBC HD have either been shut down or replaced with other BBC-based services. However, one strand, as far as I'm aware, still survives to this day. In early 2017, long after BBC HD had ceased to be in the UK, it quietly launched not in any particular country, but as part of the maritime industry.
On Board, on TV, the new comedy scene on BBC HD.
That's right, if you wanted BBC HD, you'd have to hop on a cruise for the chance to see it in action. This version of BBC HD provides a range of different programmes that the BBC offers, all of which you can watch from the comfort of your own cabin. Amazingly, nearly a decade on, BBC HD is still in operation with the original branding and all. There is even an active website, BBC HD Maritime, that has an up-to-date TV guide, a list for which cruise ships specifically you can access the channel from, and by God there's a lot of them now. I just find it incredible that this channel and brand, which began almost 20 years ago, is still going strong in some form, even if it is confined to the seas. High-definition television, like many a technological innovation before it, is something the majority of us purely take for granted now. HD is a standard inclusion in most televisions, and while still not universally accessible here in the UK, it's a far more prevalent part of our viewing experience than it was in the mid-2000s. BBC HD as a channel may not have been viewed or even accessed by many during its short life on the air, but in terms of what it represented for the BBC itself, it was the first steps it needed into the world of HD for it to be able to test, to experiment, and to figure out what kind of high-definition service it wanted to ultimately offer across each and every one of its services. So, could you consider BBC HD a flop? In some arguments, sure. Its constantly low viewing figures, the fact that HD simulcast channels overshadowed it further, its short lifespan, sure. You could say it failed. But in other lights, you can deem it a success. It brought BBC content into the world of HD. It gave audiences the first real chance to watch their favourite programmes in magnificent quality. It spawned offshoots internationally, and even the maritime-based operations that are still continuing to this day. Like a lot of televisual advances, BBC HD had a mixed history. It faced its trials and tribulations, and whilst perhaps not as well documented or remembered as others, it still holds an important and worthwhile part of the BBC's ever-continuing expansion and evolution in the world of television. Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Sean Knock, Dord Khan, Liam Domain, AJ Mac 200017, Deck, Jen, Traffy, Mr. Eurovision 1986, Evan Hart 42 Radio, Tim Ripley, Marnanal Thurman, 40-something Manchild, John McLeod, James Wallace, Ben, Stephen Oliver, Shadow Fiend 180X, Swan Ronson, Adam Gamer, Sir Fonzie Daz, Matthew Elif, Pigeon's House, Shah H, Dave Batten, Real Team Foxy Plays, Leonard Starbuck, Kevin Mallon, and Seed Diffusion, our AMTV staff members.